what does it mean when somebody says, or makes reference to the Bible, and says this is biblical? What does that mean?
Well, I'm glad that we addressed this question, because I think, like, I'm even watching a show right now, like, it's called Community, and they have a token Christian in it, and she is such a blatant, like, non-spirit-filled Christian, yet that's the way the world views Christians, right? And you watch as this girl is going through life, and she's addressing the very non-biblical things that people are doing. But the way that she's doing it is in a non-biblical way. So it's like, wait a minute, what does it actually mean for something to be biblical? And this is where I do think we all need to take a moment and think about it for ourselves. When somebody says, hey, that's not biblical, what does that mean? Because I don't think the Bible was meant to be read in, if there is a verse that addresses a character trait, flaw, or something, then there's a biblical way to do that. Because sometimes if you adapt that mentality that there's a verse, if I want to find out joy, let me go read the verses on joy. If I adapt a verse-by-verse interpretation of Scripture only, then my idea of what is biblical is going to be severely flawed. Because then there's going to be a day where I walk into a verse that kind of seems like it's contrary to what that verse said. And then my faith is going to be in the balance because I adopted this verse-by-verse study of the Word. In fact, I encourage everyone, even if you've never read the Bible, do not read a verse a day. If you want to include a verse a day with other reading later in the day, love it. But Christianity is a lot more than a verse written on the bottom of a cup of some restaurant that we get our food from. It's a lot more than a favorite verse in a tag and like a bio. It's a lot more than that. It is a consistent study of who God is, what He says, and who I am because of who He is and what He says. It's consistent. So this goes right in line with what we were saying of what the Bible is that does that spirit come contrary to the spirit I pick up when I read the Word? Is what's going on right now unbiblical because it's not the Spirit? So for instance, if the Bible does tell us, using the example we use, that if you're not actively against me, you're actually for me, to where Paul actually says, if Christ is preached incorrectly, at least Christ is being preached. Yeah. That blows my mind. That blows my mind. If that's a biblical spirit, then a non-biblical spirit would be one that says, if you're not with me, you're against me. That's not biblical. If we want to say that I need to adopt this spirit of forgiveness, then the minute we draw the line on who should be forgiven and who shouldn't, we've stepped into the it's not biblical anymore. It's not necessarily trying to find a verse in this cloud of truth that fits what I'm trying to do right now. And in that way, I'm being, biblical. Because then once you do that, then you get really caught up in the arguments of, okay, what about the Old Testament? What about the New Testament? The Old Testament says literally, go and kill this guy if things don't go right, or banish him, or, it can say some things like that get really confusing. And then the New Testament is like, oh, by the way, and if you think about committing adultery, you are worse than an adulterer. And you're like, I'm screwed. It's not that. It's not this hypersensitivity to never ever making a mistake. It's literally embodying the spirit that the Word tells me to embody. And so when things aren't biblical, it doesn't mean that I can bring about one verse that's contrary to that. It means I've experienced what the spirit of the Word is, addressing things like joy, addressing things like peace, addressing things like forgiveness. I understand these biblical spirits, and I know that this spirit is contrary to that. Does that make sense?